Calgary great and successful. We also benefit a great deal from our artistic and our social entrepreneurs. So what we're going to do right now is welcome back the gentleman that opened up the hour, and that is tonight's artist, Rob Maciak. Rob, I
Hello,
can see
thank
you
you for having me. Can you hear me?
joining us. Can you tell us a little bit? You're welcome. Can you tell me a little bit about how individual artists like you are holding up through the pandemic? How's it going for you?
Well, I mean, to start off with something positive, because it is pretty tough in the performing arts. It's great to be a Canadian citizen because there are benefits available to self-employed people, unlike our counterparts south of the border, who I think received a one-time payment last spring and who have since been topped up by another one-time payment this spring. That doesn't hold a candle to what we've received. So we are at least surviving. But I think that if you talk to a certain number of performing artists, you're going to find a pretty healthy amount of dejection, because performing arts, it seems, is pretty much the only industry that has been unilaterally and completely sidetracked for the entire duration of the pandemic. It seems as though almost every other industry has been able to operate in some capacity, off and on, depending on what the restrictions are, whereas performing arts has simply been sent sideways. I find that a lot of my colleagues have left the industry or are leaving the industry. Some are even leaving the city for unrelated employment opportunities. Colleagues of mine who are hiring for arts administration jobs prior to the pandemic would normally have an average of 60 people applying. Now, when they're advertising for an arts administration job, they get north of 750 people applying for one position. Dance and theater companies that used to operate independently of one another are now merging and consolidating their facilities with one another because they can no longer afford to pay rent for their office spaces, their rehearsal spaces, and their theater spaces. The private teaching market is much, much more saturated than usual because you have people who used to perform full-time who are now competing for private students online. And you also have fewer private students to go around because it's very difficult to get youth and even adult students interested in the prospect of studying privately online. It just doesn't have the same essence of in-person interaction as studying in person does. With respect to granting issues, when people apply for special projects grants, I mean, there have been successions of special projects grant rollouts that have been completely rescinded and pulled back from artists after the fact of them having been approved of it. Because as much as it's okay to go to Chinook Mall and pack the mall with people, it is not okay to have 2 or 3 people in a recording studio distanced 5 meters apart from one another with masks on. So those project grants have been taken back. Alberta Foundation for the Arts hasn't really done much. I do have to give a send out to Calgary Foundation and to the Rosé Foundation because they have come up with innovative ways of providing grants to organizations. However, because the restrictions that apply to performing arts with respect to like pandemic restrictions have just fluctuated back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, what you're seeing is that they have successfully acquired grant money and subsidy money in order to be able to do some sort of a semblance of a partial season online, and then they had to cancel it all. So a lot of those organizations are worried that they're going to have to give all of that grant money back, and that's kind of where we're at right now. It's really, really difficult for everybody, and we're all scrounging for opportunities. I myself started a musical instrument building and vintage instrument refurbishment company. I think I'm probably the only performing artist in the city who's done that, but that was my solution for how to get by, and that's just a little bit about what we're all facing right now.
Well, you know what? Thanks for elaborating on that and explaining it. I don't think that those of us that are not actively engaged in a career in the performing arts have an understanding of what you've been through. So when it comes to the regulations, what are you hoping to see happen sooner rather than later? What would help you the most?
Well, I mean, certainly it would be great if we could have artists be in the same room as one another. I mean, I was warned off of doing a live stream engagement with somebody. I myself live alone, so I'm allowed to have 2 friends. That's what the government says right now. So one of my legitimate cohorts is a musician. I was warned off of doing an engagement with her because it's not okay for me to gather in the same room, like the optics of it are negative. So it would be great if I mean, if, like I say, if you can have all these people shopping at the same store, if you can have people getting their nails done, getting haircuts, getting tattoos, it would also be great if we could see a certain degree of allowance for having musicians gather into the same room for a recording session, gather into the same room to do a live stream show, and ultimately, even if we could have a reduced audience of some kind. And one point that I was going to get to later on, but that I'll mention now, is we can certainly look to the examples of countries like France, Germany, and Austria, who have put together event insurance packages so that a performing arts organization that would normally be able to have 500 people, for instance, in a venue, would be able to have 150, and the event insurance policy would subsidize the amount of income that they would lose by not being able to fill every single seat of the theater, but by having to, you know, if there's a regulation for you've got one person sitting here and you have to have a certain amount of seats around them vacant so that they can be physically distanced from people, fine. But if you're going to allow arts organizations to do that, there should be some sort of an insurance policy so that they're able to financially survive while putting on such an engagement.
It's a great idea, and you know what? It always helps to have examples from other jurisdictions, so I appreciate that one. It sounds like you could probably use some partnerships with advocating for those types of things. Where else do you think we can turn in terms of getting some support for the performing arts?
Well, I mean, certainly grants agencies that that are stepping up and providing innovative means of supporting artists is great. I think that some arts organizations are faring better than others. For example, the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra has the fortune of operating out of a government-run building, so all of their subsidy money and all of their reserve money was able to go towards subsidizing the wages of personnel, despite the fact that they weren't able to put on live performances. So Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra is faring a lot better than other orchestras in the country. There are work visa issues that complicate things for people. It would be great if we could, and I realize that this is probably out of the civic scope, it's more of a federal issue, but for American and international artists who are currently residing in Canada, a lot of them neither have citizenship nor landed status, and as such, their work visas only allow them not only to work within the arts industry, but for a certain organization within the arts industry. So that really restricts their ability to get by. And of course, if you don't have landed immigrant status or citizenship, you're not going to be eligible for CERB or CRB. So it would be great to see some subsidy programs for individuals like that. And not just in terms of financial support, but also in terms of mental health support. I mean, we have an entire industry of people who have been not able to do the thing that they went to university for, the craft that they have sought to master for over 14 consecutive months now. Any type of support that you can provide those people for their mental health, but also in terms of levying restrictions so that they're able to be creative and move forward would be absolutely great.
You know what's ironic about that too, Rob, is a lot of us turn to to help our own mental health, and I don't think we stop to think about the impact that this pandemic has had on performers. So thank you for that reminder that we've got to remember that everyone is going through this in a very similar way. You know, can I ask, would you mind taking a couple of minutes to perform for us again?
Certainly. I just wanted to mention one more thing, because there was another question that I was anticipating being asked about what it's like to compete against international organizations virtually. There have been a lot of flowery accounts that politicians have issued about how nice it is that local audiences are stepping up and supporting local artists. That is, according to the majority of my colleagues, largely inaccurate. What we're seeing right now is a ballooning of globalization of the performing arts. Because everything is online and the entire world is at your fingertips, why would somebody check out a Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra live stream when they could check out a Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra live stream? Why would somebody check out a Theatre Calgary live stream when they could check out a New York Broadway live stream? Why would somebody check out a Jazz YYC event when they could check out something in New Orleans? There's a lot of that happening. So the solution in terms of local artists being able to garner audiences is ambiguous. They're all fighting, not even for money. I mean, they're not counting on making money off of online streaming. But if we could even get views in the first place, that would be great. And just, it would be really, really great to see some means of encouraging local audiences to actually support local artists. And I think that the best way for that to happen is to get us back on the stage performing in person for people. It's quite something to, we have a premier like Jason Kenney who's so excited that the Stampede is going to happen again. At the same time, he hasn't said anything about the 3 major folk festivals in the province, which were due to happen weeks after the Stampede, but which are all being canceled. And somebody like Patty Pond, who's the president and chief executive officer of the Calgary Arts Development Authority, will tell you that even the non-for-profit sector of performing arts alone brings $58 million of money into the local economy peripherally. So that's just in terms of people staying in a hotel, purchasing alcohol, going out for dinner, etc. That's not even in terms of just of direct impact to the performing arts, people purchasing tickets to events. But anyway, I just wanted to squeeze that in. Thank you for allowing me that time. And sure, I'd be happy to play something for you. So I'll get
and you know what? Let me just say, I totally appreciate you adding that. You had talked a little bit about the international experience, but I'm glad you elaborated on this. I think it's important for Calgarians to remember that it's a nice thing to think that going virtual has saved the performing arts, but your point is a good one. Everyone's competing virtually now instead of going and attending these events. So we need to keep reminding ourselves, and we need to keep reminding our community that we still need to promote local. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And yes, please give us your performance.
Sure thing. Sure.
Thanks so much, Rob.